So President Trump has announced that he is inviting Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to the White House, saying it will be my honor to host you. The New York Times have reported that President Trump on Tuesday invited Netanyahu to visit the White House next week, and he will be the first foreign leader hosted by the 47th president. Quote, "I would like to formally invite you to the White House next week," Trump wrote in a letter to the Israeli Prime Minister released by Netanyahu's office. "I look forward to discussing how we can bring peace to Israel and its neighbors and efforts to counter our shared adversaries," the president continued. "It will be my honor to host you as my first foreign leader during my second term. The meeting is scheduled to take place on February the 4th. The Israeli leader's visit comes amid the first phase of a breakthrough ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, which the Trump transition team helped broker ahead of the president's inauguration and is expected to run until early March. As part of the first phase of the fragile agreement, the Hamas terror group has agreed to release 33 hostages taken from Israel on October 7, 2023, in exchange for the release of nearly 2,000 Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. Now, I'd like to just pause for a second and state that, first of all, this deal, as I've said on the record, is immoral. I pray every day for the hostages' release, and delighted for those who have been released. But releasing 2,000 Palestinian criminals, murderers, terrorists is immoral. Sinwar, who was the architect of October 7th, was released in a prior deal. It could lead to more bloodshed. It sends a terrible message to our enemies to tell them that taking hostage pays, and in some ways it makes every single Israeli and Jew a potential hostage now. If they had a policy of we don't negotiate with terrorists, which I thought was always the sensible position, then there's no incentive. But what's interesting, though, is that Steve Witkoff and the Trump administration have said that the deal that they brokered was actually agreed to prior by Israel and Hamas and the Biden administration. And they simply helped to facilitate what was already agreed as a ceasefire deal. And I think, if anything, my sense is the fact that this deal, Hamas came to the table, was because they feared Trump, feared what he might do. So actually, I don't think we can put too much responsibility and accountability for the actual elements of this deal on the Trump table, because he was probably just working with what was already agreed by both sides. It's really more down to Israel what they choose to agree to, and I'm sure, no doubt, they face a huge amount of pressure to agree to such a deal. And this is part of the reason why I think finding ways to be less dependent on America is essential for Israel's sovereignty and security. But anyway, the article continues. Trump has suggested in recent days he wants other countries in the region to take in Palestinians displaced from Gaza in an effort to, quote, clean up the war-ravaged territory. "I wish he would take some," Trump said of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi during a Q&A with reporters aboard Air Force One on Monday. "We help them a lot, and I'm sure he can help us. I'd like to get them living in an area where they can live without disruption and revolution and violence," the president said of Palestinians in Gaza. Over the weekend, Trump also floated resettling Palestinians in Jordan temporarily or long-term, a plan quickly rejected by Jordan's foreign minister. "You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out the whole thing and say, it's over," Trump told reporters on Saturday, arguing the Gaza Strip is a real mess in the aftermath of Israel's war against terror groups in the region. Trump's Saturday comments came on the same day his administration agreed to send a shipment of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel, previously withheld from the Jewish state by former President Joe Biden over concerns that Israel would use the weapons in densely populated areas. Netanyahu's White House invitation was extended. So before I continue with the article, let's just unpack a few of these things. First of all, Israel has shown more restraint and concern with how they utilize their weaponry than any modern army has. The fact they've had a nearly 2-to-1, almost 1-to-1 ratio of combatant to non-combatant targeted, killed in this war, that's a lower ratio than any other Western army has seen in fighting not just urban warfare, but even warfare more generally at times. So it was really disgraceful, this holding up. And when Trump was asked about this, they said, why have you given over these bombs? He said, because Israel paid for them, first and foremost. People think that America just gives loads and loads of free cash and supplies. Israel actually buys them. And secondly, with regard to the relocation idea, you know what? The Arabs in Gaza and more generally in the quote-unquote Palestinian territories, they've had 100 years to agree to a deal, to agree to statehood. And they keep choosing war because they're not actually interested in state. They're interested in getting rid of Israel. So therefore, what Trump's saying, and maybe, yes, he may say it a little bit clumsily, but his sense that actually the way you move forward is by relocating Arabs to the Arab world, where they can not feel that they are like on the front lines of getting rid of Israel. And then many of the people will end up choosing to live in peace, and they also won't be able to, they'll be under a government of Jordan and Egypt rather than forming their own government, which will, if it's in Gaza, inevitably choose war with Israel. It's just a sensible option because the hypothesis that Palestinian self-determination is all that's desired has been proven time and again to be false, especially given that we're seeing widespread support for Hamas in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank as it's referred to. The article concludes by saying Netanyahu's White House invitation was extended as Senate Democrats on Tuesday blocked a Republican effort to advance legislation to sanction the International Criminal Court. The ICC issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and former Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant last spring, accusing the officials of using starvation as a weapon of war. The US does not recognize the ICC's jurisdiction. Democrats expressed concern the GOP bill to sanction the ICC would affect American allies and US companies contracting with The Hague. Quote, the ICC bill is one I largely support and would like to see become law, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said, ahead of the 55-45 vote on the measure, which needs 60 yeas to move forward. However, as much as I oppose the ICC bias against Israel, as much as I want to see that institution drastically reformed and reshaped, the bill before us is poorly drafted and deeply problematic, Schumer argued. Well, I don't know if that's true, and frankly, sometimes, as we're seeing from President Trump, you have to be bold in order to make real progress and change and really shift things along. That's been one of the interesting things I think we've seen since Trump's win. People who you might be surprised to think would believe such things or say such things or do such things are doing so because they sense the tide is shifting or they sense pressure from Trump. Even Hamas coming to the table with this ceasefire deal, which I think is wrong, but the fact they did that, it just shows that with the will and with the right tactics, you really can make significant changes in politics and in society. And so the key thing here is really just about showing strength. If you show strength, then you really can make dramatic changes. And I certainly think when it comes to the ICC, some strength is going to be needed in order to deal with that. And I'm not so sure that we should be taking advice from Chuck Schumer, who called, I think, in Congress for the overthrowing of Netanyahu and a change of leadership in Israel, which is utterly unacceptable to be interfering like that, especially at a time of war and where Netanyahu is the democratically elected leader of Israel. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.